Hi, my name is Miss Rodham. This is the first IDL lesson from the Highland Virtual Academy. It's about how much technology has changed the world in recent years, in the last 50 years, realistically. In 1976, Thomas McCulloch was put in prison for murder. He was allowed out, released in 2013. And it struck me that he'd been in prison for such a long time and the world had changed completely. In 1976, nobody had a personal computer. There weren't mobile phones. There weren't tablets. Most people didn't have debit cards. There weren't money machines in walls. None of that existed. And when he came out in 2013, all of that was just everyday technology. And it struck me how hard it must be to get used to the modern world if you've been suddenly dumped into it. So this lesson is about what it would be like to be suddenly dumped into the world and how you would cope, and about technology and how it's changed. Tomorrow's lesson is going to be more in depth on a particular technology which you choose for yourself, and which one was the most important and made the most change to the world. You will need something to write on, so you can either use a Google Doc or Word or a pen and paper. So you need to get that ready. And the Google slideshow that you need is underneath this video. Each slide has got an audio to it, so you'll hear me explaining more details. I hope you enjoy the lesson. Hi, my name is Miss Rodham. Today's IDL lesson from the Highland Virtual Academy is on how much technology has changed the world since the 1970s. You will need to either open a Google Doc or a Word doc, or use a pen and paper to answer the questions as you go through the slideshow. Do join us later this afternoon to discuss what answers you had. On the 7th of May 2013, Thomas McCulloch was released from prison. He'd been put in prison in 1976 for killing 3 people. Previous to that, he'd been put in a state hospital for murdering people in 1970. He'd been in prison for more than 30 years, and the world had changed substantially during that time. It struck me that how much the world had changed in the time between when he went into prison and when he was released, and how hard it would have been for him to live outside prison in the real world. In 1976, nobody had computers, there were no mobile phones, there were no machines in walls for taking money out. Nobody had credit cards or debit cards. The world changed substantially between 76 and 2013, and it struck me of how on earth would he manage. Here's a bit of background information on Thomas McCulloch. In 1970, he attempted to murder 2 hotel staff in an argument over not getting enough butter on his bread roll. He shot the chef at the hotel in the face and shot the manageress in the shoulder. Luckily they survived, but he was found to be a murderous psychopath. 6 years later, in 1976, he escaped from the state hospital at Carstairs, where he had been placed. He escaped by climbing over a barbed wire fence. He killed a hospital worker, a patient, and a police officer, and was eventually caught in Carlisle after holding a family hostage in their home. Thomas McCulloch was released from Castle Huntly Prison near Dundee on the 7th of May 2013. He was originally sent indefinitely to the State Hospital, a secure hospital in Carstairs, Lanarkshire, in 1970. In 1976, 6 years later, he escaped by climbing over a barbed wire fence and killing 3 more people. When he was caught, he was given a life sentence and told that he would die in custody. However, later his sentence was changed to a fixed term punishment of 30 years. So he was released in 2013 eventually. Now you've heard his story, what are your opinions? Should he have been released? And if he should, why do you think that? Secondly, he served almost 37 years in prison or state hospital. Do you think that this is the right amount of time? And again, please explain why you think that. I want your views. Also, what do you think should have been the correct sentence for his crimes? Your views are important, so please think about it and give us your opinions. Because these two events happened in the same month, in May 2013, and they both linked back to 1976, it got me thinking that Thomas McCulloch was put into prison when there was no personal computers or no digital technology at all. He came out of prison when PCs, laptops, mobile phones, tablets, games consoles were all very common. The world had changed dramatically in those 30 odd years. Imagine how you would feel if you'd been locked up in 1976 and released in 2013. How would you cope? What would you find the hardest thing to cope with, and why? This made me start thinking about all the different things that changed since the 1970s. On the following slide, there are lots of objects, or pictures of objects, 15 from the technology in the 20th and 21st centuries. On your paper or your document, however you're writing this down, see if you can say what they are. When do you think they were first used? You can have a good guess at this, or else you can look it up. And try and put them in chronological order. What is chronological order, you may say? Chronological order is date order. You put the earliest one first and the most modern one last. Lastly, what do you think has been the biggest technological change and why? You can discuss all this with your parents. There's no need for you to do it on your own because I bet they've got some good ideas as well. Hopefully you've enjoyed this lesson. Do join us later on this afternoon when we can swap ideas and I can find out what you think. Tomorrow we'll be looking at new technology in a bit more detail and you'll be deciding which technology you think has made the most impact on the world today. Hopefully see you then.